I'm going to begin with a story. One night, shortly after I moved here, I was taking my dog for a walk, and as I was crossing the street, someone drove by and yelled at me out of their passenger window, "You don't belong here." I looked around to see if there was anyone else nearby, and I quickly realized that they were talking about me. If they could tell on a dark street that I didn't belong here, who knows who else noticed it? It was one of my deepest fears made public. I was speechless. I was paralyzed. I knew I belonged here. I was called to be here, and yet I felt rejected. Through no fault of my own, I had been rejected. And from this experience, I know how the man in the parable must be feeling. He shows up at this wedding party off the street, expecting to have a good time and maybe have some free food, when all of a sudden, the king comes out of nowhere and says, "How did you get in here without the wedding clothes, friend?" And just like that, it was pointed out that he did not belong there. He was not wearing the proper attire. Back in Jesus' time, if you showed up to a wedding without proper clothing, they would give robes for you to wear. He had no excuse. He was speechless. He was paralyzed. But unlike me, it was not the party that rejected him. He was the one who rejected the clothing. Why not just put it on? If he had just followed the rules, he could have quickly put on the robe and joined the celebration. When you were baptized, maybe even here at this church, when you were baptized at the font, that was you saying, "Hey, I'll see you at the party." We've all received the invitation. God's grace is extended to all. But with the invitation comes an expectation that we uphold the promises we made in our baptism. And once we lose sight of those promises, we lose sight of God. In our own mind, we are cast into darkness with the weeping and the gnashing of teeth. We are on the outside, and our faith becomes uncertain. This fear of darkness and uncertainty reminds me of another story. This is one that I heard from Pastor Bob. Pastor Bob once attended a funeral for a guy who arranged to have an imam, a pundit, and a pastor. He wanted all three of these people there because he wanted his bases to be covered. He was that unsure about what would happen to him after he died. How terrifying, how frightening to realize that you did not meet the expectations so clearly laid out for you. Realizing that you did not meet your obligations in Christianity, in Hinduism, and in Islam. So you try to gather them all together at your funeral because this is your last chance. Can you imagine being near death, of getting older and not knowing? I don't ever want to imagine that. We do not have to be this uncertain. We are already at the party, and with it there needs to be a change, a transformation. What would have happened if this man had just put on the robe? It's an easy answer. He would have been able to join the party. It's just that simple. Really, how hard is it to just put on a robe? But he would not do it. And when we choose to reject the rules, we are choosing to ignore Christ present to us here on earth. It is not enough anymore to call yourself a follower of Christ and then act as if the rules do not apply to you. It is our responsibility to put on the robe of Christ, and only then can we enjoy everything. It allows us to not focus on ourselves and on our fate, but to truly enjoy life and to give back to others, to pay it forward, to create a change in us and in our world. And it is not just a change of clothes, but it is a change of heart. Our New Testament lesson says, "Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you." God's grace is not going anywhere. God's love will always be here. But when grace is rejected, you can no longer be sure of it. In your mind, you are cast out into darkness. You lose sight of God in your life. And the man in the parable was cast out. The man with the funeral was cast out. Anyone can be baptized. Anyone can have all of their bases covered. But few are the ones that take up the cross and live up to what they promised and are truly changed by it. When we were invited to God's banquet, it meant an immediate call to action. So now what will you do? I encourage you to let go of the things that are preventing you from putting on the clothing. Just put on the robe and join in the celebration and experience the fullness of God's grace. There's a party we really should be getting back to, and we do not want it to be too late. Amen.